My name is Evelyn Hart, 27 years old. People think childhood wounds fade with time, but some families are experts at keeping them fresh, reopening them quietly with a comment, a look, a silence. Mine was one of those families where love was conditional, attention was currency, and I was always bankrupt. My mother was the type of woman who lived on salad leaves, lemon water, and judgment. She cycled through diets like seasons, always clutching some new rule book that promised thinness and purity. She'd stare at my plate the way people stare at crime scenes, horrified, disapproving, ready to assign blame. My father. If a person wasn't profitable, they simply didn't exist to him. His universe revolved around spreadsheets, investment returns, and whatever stock he was obsessing over that month. Any problem that couldn't be solved with money wasn't worth his time. And then there was my sister, my family's certified golden child. Everything she touched was celebrated. Everything I touched was questioned, blamed, or dismissed. She thrived on attention, and I think she sensed early on that for her to shine, I needed to stay dim. Growing up with her meant growing up in a house where humiliation was a daily ritual. She had this talent, this almost artistic flair for turning me into the villain of every story. If something broke, if money went missing, if a chore wasn't done, she'd twist her face into the most perfect mask of innocence and point right at me. Every time. Like clockwork. I remember once when I was maybe 9, she accidentally spilled an entire bowl of red juice across our mother's pristine white couch. Before the stain even settled, she gasped dramatically. Evelyn did it. And of course my mother didn't need proof. My sister's word was gospel. As the years went on, the lies got bigger, the accusations sharper, the consequences more brutal. The final straw before everything changed happened when she broke a crystal bowl, an heirloom that had been passed down through generations. It shattered across the kitchen tile in a glittering, heartbreaking explosion. She froze for a moment. Then her eyes flicked toward me with a spark of opportunity. She lied so quickly, so skillfully, that I think she almost believed her own story. My parents didn't ask questions. They didn't want answers. They wanted someone to blame, and I was convenient. Within a week, I was shipped off to boarding school. There was no tearful goodbye, no promise to visit. My father signed the paperwork like he was signing a business contract. My mother told me to make the best of it, like she was dropping me off at summer camp instead of sending me away from the only home I knew. The only people who ever made me feel like I wasn't invisible were my grandmother and my aunt. Grandma had this grounded warmth, like she carried her own weather steady and gentle, and my aunt was color in a house full of grayscale. She joked with me, listened to me, treated me like I mattered. But when I was 13, she vanished from my life. One week she was there laughing and telling me stories. The next she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just a fractured silence that grew heavier every year. My grandmother stayed in my life a little longer, but even she became distant, and at that age, I didn't have the tools to understand why. I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought that maybe everyone leaving was my fault. My childhood ended in chapters of confusion, each one bookmarked with someone else's lie. Boarding school should have been a fresh start, but it only taught me something I didn't want to learn. That distance doesn't heal abandonment. It just makes it quieter. Still, I survived it. I built my own routines. I learned how to smile without feeling it. I learned how to make myself small enough to avoid trouble. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I returned home at 17. Living with my sister again felt like stepping back into an old nightmare. Same furniture, same coldness, same manipulative smirk. She was popular, adored, radiant. I was the quiet one who had been away too long, the easy target. She wasted no time picking up where she left off, undermining me, embarrassing me in front of her friends, twisting every moment into a reminder that in this family she was the sun and I was the shadow. And then came prom night, the night that burned into me like a scar. I walked into the venue hoping for at least one normal memory, one moment untouched by her games. Instead, I found her pressed against my boyfriend, my first real boyfriend, kissing him like she wanted me to see it, like hurting me was the point. She didn't even flinch when our eyes met. She didn't pull away. She smirked. It was the kind of smirk that said, I win. Something in me broke that night, not out of heartbreak, but out of realization. Realization that no matter how much distance I put between myself and my family, they would always find a way to reach into my life and twist it. I confronted my mother afterward, desperate for the smallest drop of understanding. Instead, she brushed it off. Don't be dramatic, she said. These things happen. And just like that, I understood. I wasn't going to get justice. I wasn't going to be believed. I wasn't going to be protected. So I left, for real this time. Not shipped away, not forced out. I walked out of that house, out of that town, out of that life, and I didn't look back. What I didn't know then was that leaving my family behind didn't mean the past was over. It only meant the lies were waiting in silence, gathering dust until the day I finally uncovered the truth. Leaving home was supposed to be the end of everything painful, but life isn't that clean. Trauma travels light. It packs itself into the smallest corners of your mind and follows you, no matter how far you run. For years, I lived with this quiet fear lodged inside me. Fear of being unwanted, fear of being replaced, fear that every good thing could be taken away without warning. But in the new city, something shifted. I enrolled in college with the determination of someone who'd run out of places to fall. I worked part-time, studied late, tried to build myself from the ground up. And somewhere along the way, I began to feel seen. Not fully safe yet, but seen. That's when I met him. He wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. He didn't sweep me off my feet in some movie-like moment. Instead, he noticed me in that quiet, attentive way that feels more intimate than grand gestures. He remembered small things I said. He asked how my day really was. He made room for me in conversations and spaces in his life. For a girl who grew up competing for scraps of affection, that kind of gentleness felt almost dangerous. One night, after months of dancing around whatever it was between us, he said something that cracked me open in a way I didn't expect. "You always look like you're bracing for something bad to happen," he said softly. "Like even when you're happy, you're waiting for the next hit. You don't have to do that with me." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever looked at me like that. Not through me, not around me, but directly at the wound I tried so hard to disguise. We grew closer. We fell in love, slowly, intentionally. And for the first time in my life, I felt cherished. While my new life was growing roots, my old one stayed distant. My family rarely reached out, not because they were angry, but because I simply didn't cross their minds. I asked for help with tuition once, and my parents agreed with this performative generosity, like they were philanthropists granting a scholarship. Years later, I discovered it was my grandmother who'd quietly paid my way. She never told me. She just did it because loving me came naturally to her, even if distance and manipulation had kept us apart. Then came the moment I'd both dreaded and hoped for, telling my family I was engaged. I didn't expect confetti or champagne or even a real smile, but I thought they might at least pretend to care. Instead, the response was flat, barely a hum, as if I'd said I bought new shoes instead of I found someone who loves me. Still, it wasn't their approval I wanted anymore. I just wanted them to know I had built something good without them. As the wedding plans began, the contrast between my two families became painfully clear. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law welcomed me with warmth I didn't know how to receive at first. They helped with everything: venues, colors, vendors, logistics, things my own parents didn't bother to ask about. They acted like my happiness mattered. Meanwhile, my parents floated above it all like detached observers. They didn't ask about dates, flowers, dresses, anything. But my mother did make one suggestion. "You should come back home and have the wedding here. It's better for everyone." Better for whom exactly? Certainly not for me. I politely declined and continued planning in my city. Then the invitations went out. A few days later, my mother called me with that tone she used whenever she believed she'd caught me making some unforgivable mistake. "You forgot someone," she said. "No, I didn't." "You didn't put your sister on the invitation list." "That's because she's not invited." Her sigh was dramatic, a noise she'd perfected over years of conveying disappointment without saying the words outright. "That's childish, Evelyn. She slept with my boyfriend." "That was years ago," she snapped. "People grow up. You need to stop holding grudges." Grudges. That word again. To her, everything painful that had ever happened to me was just a grudge. Something small, petty, easy to get over. I stayed calm. "She won't be at my wedding." "Well," she said sharply, "if she isn't welcome, then none of us will come." The silence that followed was long and heavy, one of those silences that feels like it's peeling away the last layer of denial. My mother wasn't asking. She was blackmailing me. It was then, in that uncomfortable quiet, that I realized something my family had never treated me like a daughter. I was a pawn, a nuisance, a loose thread they wanted tucked away neatly. After the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing, letting the truth settle in my chest like stones. They weren't going to respect my boundaries. They weren't going to protect me. They weren't going to choose me, ever. So I made a choice of my own. If they insisted on tearing open old wounds, then I would bring in the one person they never wanted to face, my aunt. The aunt they lied about. The aunt they betrayed. The aunt they erased from our family like she was a stain instead of a human being. Inviting her wasn't revenge. It was a reclamation. If my family wanted to pretend everything was fine, then I would force the truth into the room, whether they liked it or not. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the anger, a flicker of hope appeared. Maybe reconnecting with her could give me back a piece of the past they stole from me. I didn't expect my aunt to open the door when I showed up at her address. A decade of silence shapes people, makes them brittle, cautious, suspicious. So when she cracked the door open just a few inches, her eyes widening with equal parts recognition and disbelief, I felt my stomach tighten. "Evelyn," she said, like my name tasted unfamiliar. "Why? Why are you here?" Her voice wasn't warm, not yet. It carried the weight of someone who'd been cut out of a family and taught herself never to look back. "I need to talk to you," I said softly. "Please." There was a long pause. A flicker of something hurt fear. Regret passed over her expression. Then she stepped aside. Her living room was small but neat, with mismatched furniture that somehow still felt intentional. None of it looked new, yet everything was cared for. She moved around nervously, straightening cups and adjusting cushions that didn't need adjusting. For a while, she didn't say a word. She just made tea. I didn't speak either. Finally, with a quiet exhale, she set a cup in front of me and took her seat on the opposite sofa, her fingers gripping the edge of the cushion like she needed something to anchor her. "All right," she said. "Tell me." So I did. I told her I was getting married. I told her my family demanded I invite my sister. I told her I refused. I told her the wedding was happening with or without them. And then, trembling a little, I told her I wanted her there. My aunt blinked slowly, absorbing my words. But what touched her wasn't the invitation, it was the simple fact that I came to her at all. She leaned back, staring at me with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "I'm surprised you even remembered me." "I never forgot you," I said, and my voice cracked a little. "You were the only adult in that house who didn't make me feel small." Something inside her crumbled at that. Her face tightened, not in anger, but in pain. "You want to know why I left?" she said quietly. I didn't answer with words. I didn't need to. She folded her hands together, took a shaky breath, and began. "Your grandmother never disowned me," she said. "Not at first." Her eyes drifted like she was watching the past unfold behind me. "I was in love with someone Grandma didn't approve of. That part you probably know. But what you don't know is how your parents twisted everything." My chest tightened. I leaned in. "Your mother told me Grandma gave me an ultimatum." She continued. "Break up with him or be cut off." "That wasn't true," I whispered. "No," she said. "It wasn't. But I didn't know that then." She stared down at her hands. "Your father told Grandma that I planned to elope behind her back. Then he told me Grandma already knew and was furious with me. They made us both believe the worst of each other." A cold, sick heaviness settled in my stomach. She went on. "One night, Grandma had a health scare. Nothing major, but serious enough. I rushed to the hospital, terrified, and your father met me in the hallway." Her voice wavered. "He told me Grandma didn't want to see me, that she said I was selfish, that she was done with me." I couldn't finish. "I believed him," she whispered. "I was so ashamed. I left without seeing her." She closed her eyes like she was reliving it. "And then the rumors started, about me being reckless, about stealing money, about abandoning the family. I thought Grandma would hate me forever. I thought maybe they were right about me." Her voice cracked, then barely noticeable but deeply real. I didn't have the strength to fight them, so I walked away. She admitted that she tried reaching out over the years, messages that supposedly never reached Grandma, cards that were never delivered, flowers that some family friend had sent, calls that my mother intercepted. The more she talked, the more horrifying the picture became. My parents had rewritten her entire life into something ugly, and they made Grandma believe it. And when I finally realized the truth, she said I didn't know how to undo the damage. I was afraid she'd reject me anyway, afraid she'd ask why I stayed away so long, afraid of facing what I'd lost. Silence expanded between us, thick and painful. Then she looked up at me, really looked. "You were a child, Evelyn. You didn't know any of this, but you were pulled into every lie." I swallowed hard. My throat hurt. "All I knew was that you disappeared." Her eyes softened. "Not because I stopped loving you. That did it." My vision blurred. I looked away, blinking fast. After a long pause, she asked carefully, "And your grandmother? Does she know I'm here? Does she know the truth?" "She doesn't know everything," I admitted, "but she knows something was wrong. and she misses you." My aunt inhaled sharply, like that single sentence rewrote the last decade for her. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. "I'll come to your wedding, Evelyn, and I'll speak to your grandmother. I'm done hiding from ghosts your parents created." A mixture of relief and fear washed over me, because inviting her wasn't just an act of rebellion anymore. It was the spark, the match, the fuse. I knew deep down instinctively that when she walked into that wedding, something in my family would finally explode. And there was no undoing it. Weddings are supposed to feel magical, or at least peaceful. But I woke up on the morning of mine with a pressure in my chest so heavy it felt like a warning. Not nerves, not excitement. Something darker, like the universe was holding its breath, waiting for a storm that had been years in the making. Still, I pushed through it. Makeup, hair, dress. The motions were calming in their own way. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law fluttered around me, gently adjusting straps, smoothing fabric, whispering reassurance whenever they caught the flicker of anxiety in my eyes. They were the reason I stayed grounded. They gave me the kind of support I once thought didn't exist. But the moment I arrived at the venue, the air shifted. My parents were already there, and so was my sister. She stood at the entrance like it was her event-glittering dress-perfect hair, that familiar smug tilt to her chin. My mother hovered beside her like an adoring fan, while my father scanned the room as if evaluating the cost of the decorations. The second they saw me, I felt their judgment like a spotlight. But that wasn't what cut deepest. What cut deepest was the fact that I didn't see my grandmother with them. She was with my aunt. The aunt who had nearly collapsed when she saw Grandma waiting at the ceremony site earlier that morning, dressed in gentle pastel colors, clutching a small gift. She said she'd been saving for the next time she was allowed to love freely. My aunt had cried actual tears, silent and trembling, and Grandma had held her as if afraid she'd vanish again. I had given them space, stepping away so they could talk privately. Now, as I walked into the venue fully dressed, I saw my mother's face freeze when she spotted my aunt standing behind my grandmother, both of them taking their seats near the front. The look wasn't shock. It was pure fury. She stormed toward me. "What is she doing here?" she hissed. I met her glare with steady calm I didn't know I was capable of. "She's family." My mother's voice broke into a whispery shriek. "Do not play stupid with me, Evelyn. You know exactly what you're doing." "I'm inviting the people who actually care about me," I said simply. My sister chimed in, rolling her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. You never know when to let things go." A familiar burn rose in my chest. "You never apologized," she scoffed. "For what? Being honest about your toxic behavior, or attracting men you can't keep." My sister-in-law stepped forward, then her presence sharp and controlled. "This is her wedding day. If you're here to start trouble, you can leave now." My sister blinked, scandalized anyone dared speak to her like that, but she backed off, dragging our mother with her. My father lingered longer, his gaze cold, calculating. "You're creating unnecessary problems," he murmured. "Just remember, choices have consequences." "Then you should remember that too," I replied. His jaw twitched, and then the ceremony began. As I walked down the aisle, my husband's face softened with emotion, anchoring me again. The love in his expression contrasted sharply with the daggers I felt at my back, my parents' silent rage, my sister's jealousy, radiating like heat. But the ceremony itself was perfect, gentle vows, trembling laughter, a few happy tears. For a brief moment, it felt like all the noise and damage of my past had faded into the background. But peace never lasts long in a family like mine. The reception, the storm opens. The moment we entered the reception hall, the chaos simmered to the surface. My aunt quietly led Grandma into a private room, saying they needed a moment to talk. And I let them go, knowing they deserved that conversation more than anyone. But the second they disappeared, my parents noticed. My mother's face blanched. My father's eyes narrowed. Within minutes, they were standing outside that private room, pounding on the door. "What are you doing in there?" my mother hissed. "Open the door." "You have no right to keep us out," my father barked. Inside, I could hear Grandma calmly speaking, and my aunt's low voice trying not to shake. I stepped between my parents and the door. "Enough. Let them talk." My father snapped. "This doesn't concern you." "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "it does." My sister joined in, then hands on her hips, broadcasting her disdain. "You're ruining this whole event. Typical you, always looking for drama." My sister-in-law appeared beside me. "The only drama here is coming from you." My sister glared at her. "I wasn't talking to you." And I wasn't asking, my sister-in-law shot back. People nearby turned to watch. My parents realized eyes were on them, but instead of stopping, they escalated. My father leaned in close, his voice venomous. "You are an embarrassment. You always have been." The room went silent. All at once, I felt 12 years old again. standing by that broken crystal bowl, accused of something I didn't do. But then my husband's hand slid around my waist. Enough, he said sharply to my parents. If you continue harassing my wife, you will be escorted out. My father's expression twisted. You think you can tell me? But he didn't get to finish. Security arrived. My mother shrieked. My father protested. My sister gasped dramatically. And in front of every guest, my parents were escorted out of my wedding. It was humiliating for them and for me, but I felt a strange lightness settle in my chest. Freedom always comes with a scene. I barely had a moment to breathe before I checked my phone. Messages flooded in, friends, acquaintances, unknown numbers. Confusion, sympathy, screenshots. My sister had gone live, crying, wailing, clutching her chest like a grieving widow. She told her followers I was abusive, that I'd ruined the family, that I'd thrown out our loving parents for no reason, that she'd tried her best to support me despite my jealous, vindictive behavior. The comments were endless. You're such a good sister. I can't believe she did that to you. What kind of monster throws out her own parents? Stay strong, queen. She hijacked my wedding to center herself, to play victim, to turn strangers into weaponized sympathy. I felt my stomach twist, anger, grief, exhaustion swirling together. And while this drama unfolded online in that quiet room at the reception hall, something else was happening. My aunt and grandma were finally unraveling the decade of lies that had ripped them apart. Two tragedies unfolding at once, one public, one private, both about to reshape everything. The morning after the wedding felt like waking up inside the aftermath of a storm, quiet but not peaceful. My phone was already buzzing nonstop, vibrating across the nightstand like it was trying to get away from the chaos inside it. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet, and I already knew my family had made a mess so big, even sleep couldn't hold it back. The first notification I saw was a link to my sister's live stream, the one she'd started while crying crocodile tears at my reception. Overnight, it had blown up. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, her face swollen with fake emotion as she ranted about how I humiliated our parents, how I pushed her away her whole life, and how she had always tried so hard to love me. She forgot to mention the part where she'd spent years tearing me apart for sport. But what caught my attention were the comments underneath. They weren't all praising her. Some people noticed her inconsistencies, how she'd cry one moment, then stop mid-sob to adjust her angle, how she contradicted herself at least 3 times in the same sentence, how her sadness looked oddly rehearsed. The internet can be cruel, but it can also be very good at spotting performance. Still, the damage was done. People who didn't know me at all were now analyzing my wedding like it was a soap opera they were entitled to critique. Strangers debating whether I was mentally unstable, a narcissist, or a brat who deserved it. It felt like my entire life had been thrown into a blender and served to the public. But before I could spiral, my phone buzzed again this time with a message that steadied me instantly. Grandma, come over. It's time. When I arrived at Grandma's house, my aunt was already there. They both looked like they'd cried a decade's worth of tears. There were old photo albums open on the table, tissues everywhere, and an unspoken heaviness in the air that made my throat tighten. I sat down, and Grandma took my hand with a seriousness I'd only seen once before when she told me goodbye before boarding school. You need to hear the truth, she said quietly. And so they told me. Everything. Every lie my parents planted. Every manipulation. Every carefully crafted wedge driven between my aunt and my grandmother. Every distorted message. Every intercepted card or call. Every rumor they spread to maintain control. By the time they finished, I realized something horrifying. My parents didn't just ruin relationships, they engineered them. My aunt looked down at her trembling hands as she spoke. I thought she hated me, Evelyn. I thought I'd disappointed her so badly she never wanted to see me again. Grandma wiped her eyes. And I thought she abandoned me. Your parents made sure of it. 2 women who loved each other more deeply than most people ever love anyone ripped apart by people who were supposed to protect them. It hit me then the same pattern had repeated with me. Lies, gaslighting, blame, control. My family of origin didn't raise children. They raised narratives. And I was done being one of them. That night I emailed a lawyer. By morning I had an appointment. When I showed him the live stream my sister had posted, he didn't even need to think about it. He watched the clip twice, pausing occasionally to take notes, then looked at me with complete certainty. This is defamation, he said, and a strong case. I filed the lawsuit. The moment my sister was served, She posted another video. Less tears, more rage. She accused me of trying to destroy her, said I was jealous of her success, and that I was twisting events to punish her for being the better sister. What she didn't understand was that courtrooms aren't influenced by followers or likes. My aunt quietly filed her own lawsuit against my parents the same day. Not for online drama, for the years of emotional warfare they waged against her. And unlike my sister, my parents had left a paper trail. Old emails, text messages, recordings, letters, they thought no one kept. My aunt had all of it. And then the court dates came. My sister arrived at mine wearing soft colors, minimal makeup, her hair pulled back, trying to look like a wounded dove. She cried on the stand, tried to say she was misunderstood, tried to pretend she'd never meant to hurt me. But my lawyer pressed play on the live stream again. He didn't have to say anything. Her smug expressions, the sarcastic tone shifts. The moments she dropped her performance, all of it spoke louder than any argument. When the judge asked her directly whether she knowingly spread false statements about me, she froze, stammered, lied once, got caught, and the case was decided right then. I won. She owed damages, but the best part was the court order for her to publicly retract everything she said on every platform she used to smear me. Watching her post that apology was surreal. She looked small, angry, exposed. My aunt's case was even more intense. Hearing the evidence out loud felt like walking backwards through time into memories I never experienced, but somehow still felt connected to. Emails where my father pretended to be grandma. Messages where my mother manipulated events. A decade of twisted narratives finally being dragged into the light. My father couldn't handle it. He snapped, raised his voice, accused everyone of betrayal. Tried to paint himself as a martyr. The judge shut him down immediately. My mother cried the way my sister does, violently, dramatically, strategically. But the courtroom wasn't interested in theatrics. My aunt won her case too. My parents were ordered to pay damages and were issued a restraining order that barred them from contacting her ever again. It should have made me feel triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, like I was grieving a version of my family that never existed to begin with. A few days later, Grandma called us back to her house. She was calm, composed, almost frighteningly certain when she told us her decision. "I'm removing your parents from my estate," she said. "Everything goes to you and your aunt. I won't let manipulation rule this family anymore." My aunt dissolved into tears. I sat there stunned, trying to understand how everything had come full circle so suddenly. My grandmother wasn't being vindictive. She was correcting history. And for the first time in my life, I realized something important. Some families don't break. They're already broken, you just finally stop pretending. Grandma's decision should have felt like some kind of victory, but instead it settled over me like a weight, heavy, complicated, nothing like the neat ending people imagine when they hear that the villains finally got what they deserved. Nothing about this felt victorious. It felt like standing in the ruins of a house I once tried so hard to call home. But Grandma was resolute. She didn't waver. She spoke with a clarity that made it obvious she had been carrying guilt for years. Guilt for believing lies, for not questioning the stories my parents fed her, for letting distance grow where love should have stayed. "I let them poison our family," she whispered. "I won't let them do it again." My aunt cried so hard her shoulders shook. She wasn't crying because of the inheritance. She was crying because the woman she thought she'd lost forever was sitting right in front of her, choosing her, believing her, loving her again without condition. That kind of healing hurts. It hits old bruises you didn't know were still sore. I sat there watching the two people who had always loved me, just separated by lies I couldn't fathom, finally bridging a decade of distance. Something inside me softened, loosened, clicked into place. It was the first time in a long time I felt like something in my life was being repaired instead of damaged. But peace never arrives in my life without someone trying to ruin it. It didn't take long before my parents found out about Grandma's decision. They didn't call me. They knew better by then. They didn't reach out to my aunt, either, thanks to the restraining order. Instead, they went for the one person they thought they could manipulate, my mother-in-law. They called her, texted her, sent long paragraphs about how I was brainwashed by my aunt, how I was turning against the family for money, how they raised me with love and I was destroying their lives. My mother-in-law sent every message to me immediately. She didn't bother responding to them, didn't engage, didn't sympathize. She simply forwarded the screenshots and added, "You don't owe them anything, they're desperate." My parents weren't used to people who couldn't be manipulated, and they certainly weren't used to being blocked. For the first time, their control meant nothing. And I realized then, desperation makes dangerous people even more unpredictable. So I made my own decision. I filed a restraining order against them too. I didn't want them showing up at my home. I didn't want them cornering me in public. I didn't want them trying to twist my husband's family into their narrative. I didn't want any more poison seeping into my life. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. For the first time, I was choosing myself over their expectations. When the papers were served, my father lost control again. He sent a long, furious message, pages of insults, accusations, and threats wrapped in fake moral righteousness. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their power only worked when I engaged. Their cruelty only hurt when I let it close enough, and I was finally done being their target. Meanwhile, something unexpected began unfolding quietly. My grandmother and my aunt, two people who once believed lies about each other without hesitation, started living together. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Grandma said she didn't want to waste another day apart. My aunt said she finally felt at home again after years of living like a ghost. Watching them heal was like watching sunlight that slowly warm a room that had been cold for too long. Sometimes I'd visit and find them cooking together, Grandma instructing my aunt laughing at how rusty she'd become. Other times they'd be going through old photos, piecing memories back together like a puzzle that had been scattered on purpose. It felt like witnessing the family I was supposed to have. As for me and my husband, life finally began to feel normal again. Quiet, steady hours. We cooked dinner together, argued about paint colors, went on walks, without feeling like someone was waiting around the corner to create a new disaster. The silence was healing, not threatening. One evening, as I sat on the couch with my head resting on his shoulder, he said something simple but profound. "You don't have to look over your shoulder anymore." And he was right. The chaos had ended. The screaming had stopped. The manipulation had been exposed. The lies had collapsed under their own weight. I didn't win because I sued them. I didn't win because Grandma changed her will. I didn't win because my sister's online image fell apart. I won because I finally built a life where their cruelty had no room to grow. A life that didn't revolve around surviving them. A life that felt peaceful, not empty. Quiet, not dangerous. New, not broken. And as strange as it sounds after everything that happened, I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I was finally free.